Good morning, everybody. Looks like it's going to be a beautiful day today. The snow has melted off again. The sun's coming up. The chickens are crowing. Let's get to work. Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to the shop. I'm happy you're here. First on the bench today, which one? We have a couple fresh ones in lineup. There's a Stihl 028. And here is a 361. Let's start with a 361. Welcome back to my workbench. Today we have this MS361 chainsaw. This is a 59cc professional saw. The customer says it has a running issue. The handle is loose and it leaks bar oil. He wants to know whether he should put money into it or buy a new chainsaw. So I'm going to do just a visual kind of check on the saw before we go too far. So the oil cap, it's wet underneath. I wonder if it's just not the cap leaking. That would be easy if that was the case. Bar and chain. It looks like he's good at sharpening. Chain looks nice and sharp. The bar is in good condition. Just looking at the saw here, the plastics all look to be in good condition. The handle's not broken. This handle isn't broken, but there's definitely some AV mount problems here. Chain catcher is broken. Overall, it looks not too bad. I'll inspect the rope here. I'll just make sure the saw is off. Just checking for fraying. The rope looks good. He bought this saw new in mid-2000s. He said it's cut a ton of wood and he's done minimal maintenance to it. Okay, let's remove the bar and chain off this saw. That'll make it a little easier to work on. Stuff out of the way here. Okay, so with the bar and chain off, we're going to inspect the area here behind the clutch cover. It looks like it's going to need a rim sprocket. You can see the chain catcher is just missing. So whenever I see a chain catcher missing, I always look at this area, the fuel tank, closely. I've seen where this has been missing and a chain has come back and whacked the fuel tank. You don't want to do a bunch of work to this and find out that that's leaking. So just examining that. The chain catcher is pretty important to have there. Protects your hand, protects the tank, keeps the chain out of this area. I don't see evidence of an oil leak over here. I'm pretty sure it's just the oil cap that's causing the leaking problem. So no big deal there. Next, let's check his fuel, empty the tank, and have a look inside. There's a bit of sawdust and stuff in there. Fuel filter looks to be original. And the fuel line looks okay, but we're going to look closer at that. His fuel smells good. I don't see any water. Just a little bit of sawdust or something in his fuel. Take this air filter cover off and have a look. Lots of dirt. He may need a new air filter. So he's probably cleaned this plenty of times, but it's If we repair this saw, we'll be replacing this air filter. It's probably original to the saw. It doesn't look like there's not much dirt around the intake, so I'd say this air filter has been doing its job well. Something else I should have done is just verify that the chain brake is working. So the brake is set, no movement. If I unset it, there you go. Just wanted to do that before I kept going here. Okay, we're going to remove the spark plug cap and remove this top cover. There's a little pull tab there. That makes that easier to get that off. And let's take that top cover off. So I'm going to have a look at this saw to try to find out why everything is so loose here. Right off the bat here, this spring, this AV spring that mounts to the handle, you can see it's just totally broken. So we would have to replace that. On the bottom front of the saw here, there's another AV mount. It looks fine, it's not broken. Up in here is supposed to be like a little donut style AV mount. It's just not there, it's gone. So we'd have to replace that as well. Behind the clutch cover, there's one in here too. It's hard for me to show you, but it's there. I can see it and it looks fine. Okay, and there's also one right here at the fuel tank. It's totally wore out. So we'd be replacing that one as well. So when a saw comes in like this with a running issue and AV mounts all wore out and missing, that's a signal to pay close attention to the intake boot. We're going to pressure vac test this saw and just make sure that the intake boot is fine. Okay, let's pull the spark plug and have a look at the piston and cylinder. The customer did say when he dropped this off that as far as he knows, this is the original spark plug. It is a Bosch. It looks okay. I'll have a look down the spark plug hole here. For the age of this saw, I see a little bit of carbon scoring, but it looks excellent. The piston and cylinder are in excellent condition. When we pull the muffler off this to do the pressure vac test, we'll get a better look at the engine from the other side. So here's my compression tester. This is an Echo branded one. Make sure our decompression valve is out. And then we're going to pull it over until the gauge stops moving. Let's see what we got here. 155, 156. I'd say that's lots of compression. Remove our tester. I'm going to have a look at the carburetor. I can see the limiter caps are still in place, so that's a good sign. We're going to hook up the tool to the fuel line and pressurize it and test the fuel line and the carburetor for leaks. Take the fuel cap off and fish my fuel line out with my little Stihl tool here. Fuel filter. Just attach that on there to keep it up here. The fuel filter, it's pretty clean. It could be original. If we end up repairing the saw, then we'll be replacing that as well. Okay, let me grab my tool here and we'll hook it up to the fuel line. This tool does vacuum and pressure. We're going to make sure that we are on pressure, and we're going to pump it up to 0.7 bar. And we're going to watch for it to hold pressure. Which it is. Now I'm going to remove the air filter base, and then we're going to check the tank vent. 8 mil. Okay, after a little fight, I got the throttle rod disconnected off the carburetor. Now I'll go ahead and remove the carburetor. It should just slide right out of there, just like that. So with our carburetor off, I'm going to get my tool. We're going to hook up to the fuel line here, and we're going to test the tank vent. It's going to be hard to see, but just looking in here, down where the fuel line, down near where it goes to the tank, there is some cracking in the line there. So if we repair this saw, we'll be replacing this fuel line at the same time. And I'll make sure I'm on vacuum. So we're going to suck the air out of the tank and see if the tank vent is working. I can hear it. I can hear it sucking air. The tank vent is working. When you're doing this tank vent test, it's very important to remember to have all the fuel out of your tank and to have your fuel filter off, or else you're going to suck fuel up into your expensive tool. Something else to check on is to check your tools working properly. So you put your thumb over the end here and just pull pressure and vacuum and make sure your tool isn't leaking, or you'll get a false reading. I'm going to unhook my tool, and then we're going to go ahead and do a pressure vac test on this engine. And we are going to remove the decompression valve. I can't do a pressure vac test with that in because it could leak. I'm going to use this to remove the decompression valve because this handle does interfere with my ratchet. Okay, decompression valve is out. And I'm going to put that in the decompression valve hole to plug it up. Okay, that's tightened in. So next we're going to plug up the intake and the impulse. Use this tool here. This is from Stihl. Move the fuel line out of the way. So that slides on just like that. There's my port when I go to test. I put these 2 washers on. These washers just protect my tool from getting damaged. And my original carb nuts, we'll use them for this test. Actually, I'm not going to use those 2 nuts I just said. I'm going to use these instead. Those other ones are locking nuts. There, our intake and our impulse are sealed up. And next we'll move on and seal up our exhaust port. Okay, let's remove the muffler. So T27, 3 screws, 1, 2, and there's 1 on the side there. These mufflers usually have little caps pushed in here. All those caps do is keep mud and dirt and debris out of there. Okay, so we'll go ahead and remove this muffler. can't see down in here, all you can really do is feel your way around. When my husband's working on these, he says he's using the force. I don't know what he means by that. They are tight. Tight little screws. There. Just like that. I'll also get the gasket and cooling plate out of here. They can interfere with my test if I leave them. While I've got it off, you might be able to get a good look down in there. Okay, so I'll go ahead and attach my adapter. I'm going to use the 2 muffler screws I took out and the rubber. I'll tighten this down, but not all the way, and then I'll slip the rubber in behind it and I'll tighten it up. And then I'll tighten those down. I'm going to tighten this one down first. If not, tighten this one down first can kick the rubber out of there. And then you won't have a seal. So this saw has 5 places that must be sealed up to do a pressure vac test. The muffler, the spark plug, the decompression valve, the intake, and the impulse. We've got all of them plugged up. So in theory, this saw should be airtight now. Okay, I'm going to hook my tool up here, and we're going to do a vacuum test. I always do vacuum and then do pressure. The reason I do vacuum first is if you do a pressure test, air and oil can kind of push out the crank seals and create a seal where maybe there wasn't one. And then I do a vacuum test and it gives me a false reading. So that's the way I do it. So let's go ahead with our vacuum test. I'll make sure that my tester is on vacuum. And we're going to pump it up to 1/2 a bar. And we're watching for it to hold. I'm going to rotate the flywheel. And I'm going to just move the engine a bit. Make it do the wiggle. If there was, sometimes you can have a leak in the intake boot, and sometimes you have to wiggle it to find the leak. My gauge is not moving. I would say that saw holds vacuum. Okay, now let's do a pressure test. So make sure my gauge is set to pressure. And again, I'm going to pump up to 1/2 a bar. My gauge isn't exactly zeroed, so I have little marker marks on here, and I'm going by that marker. You don't want to pump too much air into this because you could create a problem that doesn't exist. So 1/2 a bar, it's holding. Again, I'll move the flywheel. Wiggle the engine. That gauge is not budging. So this saw holds vacuum and holds pressure. Okay, so I'm going to unhook my tool here. I should mention too that earlier I didn't have the camera on, And I did a spark test, and spark is good. So I'm going to move this saw out of the way, and we're going to inspect the carburetor. Okay, so next I am going to pressure test the carburetor, and then we're going to open it up and take a look inside. Let me grab my tool here. I'm going to hook up my line to the fuel inlet. Make sure my tool is set to pressure. I'm going to pump this up to 0.7 bar carefully because it goes there fast. I don't want to overpressurize it. Okay, and then we're just looking for it to hold, which it is. Okay, I'll unhook my tool and get that out of the way. So we're going to open this carburetor up and have a look inside. I'll remove the pump side. So I'm just looking here for signs of dirt. Sometimes you'll take these off and you'll find, water and rust and debris and all sorts of stuff. There's a little screen in there. It's present. It's clean. So this looks like I would expect it to look. There's a very good chance that this carburetor's never been rebuilt before since new, but it looks clean. Now I'm going to remove the diaphragm side. So this diaphragm, it's a little bit crunchy. The customer, he said he bought this saw probably 20 years ago, and he's pretty sure that no one has ever touched this carburetor. He's never changed the spark plug. I think all he's done is maybe clean the air filter in 20 years. So I'm just going to peel that off of there. The carb is like very clean inside. So the limiter caps, there's no puller marks. Those caps have never been touched. The screws have no marks on them. I would say this carburetor hasn't been touched since this saw was brand new. Okay, I've put the pump side cover back on. I want to test the needle and seat just to make sure that they're holding. So I'm going to grab my tool here. I'm going to hook up to the fuel inlet. I'm going to make sure that I am on pressure. I'm going to pump this up to 0.7 bar. I can hear that. 0.7 bar. That gauge is dropping. Let me just grab some soapy water and we'll spray it on there. That's a leaking needle and seat. So this would explain the saw's running issue. The carburetor is overfueling. This would explain the carbon buildup in the muffler. There was some carbon in the spark plug. This would explain a lot of things. When I tested this with the diaphragm side cover on, it gave me a false reading. So I took it one step further and we found this. So this carb may or may not be rebuildable. We'll have to look deeper. Maybe there's just some dirt in there, but we'll have to see. Okay, so I wasn't expecting this. So I went and looked. I have the carb kit in stock here for this. I took the needle out of it. So here's the old needle. Little. I took the new needle, installed it, and it's still leaking. So the seat in this carburetor is damaged. It's corroded. Maybe water sat in there or something, but the seat is bad. The seat is not replaceable. So I'm glad I caught this, because if I would have quoted the customer on just rebuilding this carb, AV mounts, fuel line, service, I would have ordered the parts, done the work, and we still would have had problems here. So I am going to get a quote together for him, call him, let him know he's either going to fix this or he's going to buy a new chainsaw. I would love to fix this saw, but ultimately it's going to be up to him what he wants to do. I will give him a call and we will go from there. Thanks for watching. I was able to get a hold of the customer and he did approve the repair. So I'm going to order everything I need to make this repair, and we'll get the saw back in action for him. So the parts will arrive in a couple days and then we'll get to it. I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.